there actually is not an equivalency between how powerful Democrats respond to political violence against their political opponents and how powerful Republicans like Trump respond to political violence against their political opponents. So let's go through this again. You've seen Democrat after Democrat, like Vice President Kamala Harris, right whenever the news was a little bit uncertain, saying, I've been briefed on reports of gunshots fired near former President Trump and his property in Florida, and I'm glad he's safe. Violence has no place in America. Keep these in mind, and then we'll look at some videos that are going viral of Trump that are very different in how he has responded. Biden saying this.
Before I begin, I want to make a quick reference. The attempted assassination against our former president in Florida yesterday. I commend the Secret Service for the expert handling of the situation. And the former president is protected from harm and the subject is in custody. An acting head of the Secret Service is in Florida today assessing what happened and determining whether any further adjustments need to be made to ensure the safety of our former president. Let me just say, there is no, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, those of you who know me, many of you do, no place in political violence for political violence in America. None. Zero. Never.
Exactly right. Unequivocal. Ro Khanna, just to give you an example of Democratic congressman, 2 assassination attempts in 60 days on a former president and the Republican nominees unacceptable. The Secret Service must come to Congress tomorrow, tell us what resources are needed to expand the protective perimeter, and let's allocate it in a bipartisan vote the same day. Not just denouncing political violence or the threat of it, but also wanting to take steps to prevent it in the future as it directly pertains to Trump, taking this very seriously. Jason Crow, a Democratic congressman, saying this.
What updates, what amendments, what changes need to be made to former President Donald Trump's security at this point, if any, do you think?
Well, I have to just say outright that I condemn this and any violence. There's just no place for political violence in America. We should settle our debates with debate and discourse, not with violence. And you shouldn't have to be a Democrat or a Republican or independent or anybody to condemn that. It's just unacceptable.
Exactly. Really not that complicated. At one point, I'll jump past this just since we want to be efficient in this conversation. Biden did also say, as he was heading to the helicopter, that he wants to make sure Secret Service has any help they need to keep Trump safe. Trump just recently, to give you a sense of the difference, when asked about the bomb threats being made in Springfield, wasn't so mindful of opposing political violence.
Did you denounce the bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio?
I don't know what happened with the bomb threats. I know that it's been taken over by illegal migrants, and that's a terrible thing that happened. Springfield was this beautiful town, and now they're going through.
Wasn't able to denounce. He could have just said if there have been bomb threats, then of course, but instead it's right back to the dehumanizing of legal immigrants. He keeps calling them undocumented immigrants, or he says illegal immigrants, and that's inaccurate. A resident of Springfield, Chadwick, said 2 of our elementary schools were just evacuated due to threats. Both of our colleges have gone virtual this week due to threats. The city just canceled our annual Culture Fest because of threats. None of this was happening before Trump and Vance opened their mouths, and it cites an article there. MAGA, the outrage you feel about a lunatic wanting to hurt Trump, or in the case of Butler, hurting Trump and killing one of his supporters. You should feel outraged. That is outrageous. My request is that you feel that universally when it comes to political violence or threats of political violence. Paul Pelosi had his head bashed in with a hammer, is still recovering to this day, dealing with trauma. And do you remember what Trump said right after?
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
Nearly killed. And not some rando online, but the leader of the Republican Party is making that joke. Trump's son reposted this, which is underwear with a hammer on it. Paul Pelosi was in his underwear when he got his head bashed in with a hammer, and MAGA made up a bunch of fake stories, completely bogus, about how Paul Pelosi's attacker was in a gay relationship with Paul Pelosi and it had gone wrong. That's what happened. Not true, but they made it up so they didn't have to engage with how the election lies drove this right-wing individual to attacking Paul Pelosi. Trump also said this.
No terror during my administration. The only terror we had was Nancy Pelosi, who's a crazed lunatic. She's a lunatic. She is a crazed lunatic. What the hell was going on with her husband? Let's not ask. Let's not ask. I'll withdraw that statement. By the way, she's got a wall around her house. Obviously, in that case, it didn't work very well.
If you could find me a Democrat in a position of power who made jokes like this about Trump, I'd feel as outraged as I do about Trump making jokes like this. But you can't. You can't. You can find some influencers being crazy out there who identify as on the left making jokes, and that I have and would denounce. You can find people in comments of things, but you don't have Kamala Harris, which is the equivalent of Trump on the other side when it comes to the two power structures. You can't find a moment of her mocking the attack on Trump like this. She takes it seriously, and actually Biden and her want to see enhancements to Trump's protection because of incidents like this. So if you're a MAGA person out there and you're thinking, gosh, this is a whataboutism, or this is sort of distracting from the more pressing event that just happened, it's not. Because my point here is that I want a consistent, this is what a lot of people are calling for, consistent standard opposing political violence. And it feels like in a moment like this, that's when we could unite around such a principle. But all too often, many of you are willing to be outraged about political violence when it is against your side but not the other. And there are some who have that inconsistent standard on my side as well. But what we see is the epicenters of power, they're just not the same. And those that more accurately represent a larger portion of their movement, being elected Democrats or prominent candidates, it's not the same. The leader of one of the movements mocks that violence. The leader of the other just never would. And that's what I'm trying to point out here. And so I'm glad Trump is okay. And we are going to defeat him, hopefully, by voting, not violence.